We interrupt this regularly scheduled Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast to bring you the special Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And why is it special? Because we're going to be talking about winter 2023-2024. And our special guest, we have Dave Tolleris in the house, folks. Dave, the great Dave Tolleris is here, and the great Bill Goodman is also here with us tonight. Yes, it's a Brady Bunch foursome here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County. Mulch, topsoil, and sand, and everything else you need to make your home look great. 631-756-1125 is for the best prices in town, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Yes, and Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned. Well, the link is actually on the descriptor to this video tonight. And if you use the coupon code I want a weather station, because deep down inside, Dave, you want a weather station. And
I do, actually.
yes, use the coupon code I want a weather station for anything you purchase from the Tempest website. And Joe Rayo, what do they get if they use that coupon code?
They're going to get a whopping big 10% off.
Yes.
Don't sit.
And here we are on the 4-box tonight. It's, yeah, you're already rubbing it in, aren't you, Joe?
What is that? I didn't see the hat. Let me see it again. Was it?
Here it is, right there, Dave.
Oh, well.
Dave,
They have no chance. They have no chance against the Rangers. So,
Dave is a Phillies fan, correct?
yes.
All right.
So,
Well, welcome to everybody tonight on the chat board, and welcome to those of you who are watching tonight, lurking in the background here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. It's a special podcast tonight because we are going to be talking about the upcoming winter 2023-2024, with Dave Tolleris of WxRisk. He's on the upper left, and he's got his little, what was that, dinosaur teeth?
T-Rex.
T-Rex. And on the upper right, we have, National Weather Service meteorologist Bill Goodman from the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Upton, New York, which for those of you who don't know where Upton is, it's in central Long Island in the wonderful town of Brookhaven. So it's great to have both of you here.
Great to be here.
Thanks.
Good.
Yep.
We're very happy to have you here. So why don't we let's get started. The winter here, I think this year, because of the way the winter we had last year, we'll start with Dave. The winter we had last year was, how shall we say, for many places in the East, subdued. I think that's.
I would use the term sucked.
Well, I was going to avoid the other S word option, and any other S words options.
The irony of what you just said, Joe, I mean, the folks who live in Buffalo would strongly disagree with you.
Well, that's right, because they had that.
I mean, if you remember they got wonked with one of their biggest lake effect snow events.
Yeah, frightening event. Yes,
in November, I think, actually.
Yeah, a frightening event. Really frightening how intense that was. Yes. So,
not everybody got scot-free in terms of snow, but anyway.
So before we get to that, we should. I think before we start talking about the winter, and I think it's just partially related because I've been paying extra attention to a couple of things, and Bill, I maybe you could start with this as far as what your opinion is. The tropics right now seem to be having a rather interesting impact on weather systems and certainly on the models themselves, I believe, because either they're either in one instance they might be overdoing it or underdoing it, but we're seeing where, and I think you have Tammy out there moving northward toward Bermuda, and it's essentially feeding that ridge that's off the southeast coast and kind of locking it in there for the rest of this week anyway. We've got these, usually in the Pacific, by the time we get to the latter part of October in the Eastern Pacific, it usually dies off. And I'm just wondering that we're seeing that lake activity in the East Pacific, plus with what's going on in the Atlantic. I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me like things are just off. I think things have been off for a while, but this is really starting to, put support into the idea that the atmosphere is not behaving the way it should, but that we would expect it to behave given what we have with the developing El Nino and the negative NAO and a few other things. I just, I'd like your thoughts on. We'll start with Bill. Your thoughts on that?
It's been a strange year. I mean, I think there's normally some lag time between when you have a developing El Nino event when its effects really get felt. And I had thought like this. I thought maybe this pattern we got into with rain every weekend was maybe the start of actually feeling the effects of it. But yeah, the Atlantic's not done yet, and I think even after Tammy, it's still not done. I think whatever's left in its wake is probably gonna do something.
Dave, your opinion?
Well, the El Nino has been an issue for me since it began during the summer months because it has a big impact on the commodity markets around the world, and I do a lot of grain forecasting. So, for example, in my original spring forecast, assumed El Nino was coming. And if you look at all the El Ninos since 1900, there has never been a drought in the Midwest when you've had a moderate, or at the time was assumed to be a strong El Nino developing in the summer. That's never happened. And if you look at the drought monitor map, we're finally coming out of it now, but if you saw the drought monitor maps in July, in August, September, give an example, May, June, July, into August were like the 3 or 4 driest, in the top 3 or 4 driest on record for the Midwest. Large areas in Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, Illinois went to D3 and D4 conditions. So that's a problem right there. That's a big indication that the El Nino is not doing it. The drought in Argentina always gets hammered with rain. They finally started getting rain, but they had the driest September on record. Okay, and September for them is March, so Southern Hemisphere. Then, of course, there's the tropical activity. And of course, and the rule is generally when you have a moderate El Nino, your tropical activity is way below normal. And this year, we're up to the T storm. The activity doesn't want to die. And so that's really unusual. So, and then finally, the other values is, and I'm talking about this in the presentation, there's something known as the MEI, the multivariate Ensemble index. And what that is that's another way of measuring El Nino. Most of us look at the sea surface temperatures, in a certain region along 3.4. The multivariate index is 5 different factors: sea surface temperatures, wind, clouds, precipitation, and barometric pressure. And the MEIs, if you look at the ones like 2015, 16, they spike up just like, you can see a strong El Nino. You look at the 97, 98, you see this big, huge spike when they get very strong El Ninos. The MEIs and the El Ninos, they match. 82, 83, 91, 92, 87, 88, so on and so forth. But this one is way below normal. It's not even close to it. You see the graphs of the 2015 strong El Nino, the 82, 83, 87, 88, 97, 98. It's way below normal. It barely matches weak El Nino. If you want to know the truth, it's even performing underneath the moderate level.
Well,
so that's another indication to me that this El Nino is not doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Well, and you make a good point because this is where I get it gets me. Not angry may not be the right word, but I get disturbed over the fact that you get the general mainstream media stuff that everything is off the wall, strong, apocalyptic, the yes. Strong El Nino. You're right. This is a weak El Nino, and I would argue that the 3-year La Nina is probably still not completely worked out of the atmosphere. A little bit yes. of muscle memory going on. The active hurricane season in the Atlantic, I think, pretty much surprised everybody with respect to the fact that, well, if you're going to have a developing El Nino, you should have, at least a par year, if not a subpar year. That didn't happen. We're still ahead of the Pacific side, which is to me, uncanny. And the other thing, and Bill, you and I, we talked about this a number of times, and I'm still wondering about it. And I want to just touch on Adam Lowe on the chat board. Adam Lowe, the NAO is not a bank account, okay? You don't use it all up and then you don't have anything left anymore. He says long range models have the NAO going positive in November. Have we used all the negative NAO for the winter season this fall? It doesn't work that way. I would say the fact that the NAO has been negative pretty much since the end of June, except for this 10-day period in late August, early September when it went slightly positive. It's been mostly negative for the last 4.5 months. I'm a much stronger believer in the idea of persistence and that the trend is your friend. And until the trend is broken, you just go with what's there. And the NAO looks like it wants to be negative and it wants to stay negative. And I wonder how that's all going to play into this.
Well, there's also another aspect to this, and that is for the past 3 or 4 winters, I think Bill will confirm this, and I'm sure you know this, Joe, both Joes, that the PDO has been persistently negative. Okay. Yeah. And to remind people what the PDO is, the Pacific Decade Oscillation, that's the water temperatures from Alaska down to Baja, California in the Eastern Pacific. That has been consistently colder than normal, cold sea surface temperature anomalies, which produce a negative PDO. And that in turn places or favors the mean trough being on the West Coast, and you get a ridge on the East Coast. Look at last winter, record snows in California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Utah. Meanwhile, in the eastern United States, very warm temperatures, you couldn't buy a snowflake south of Interstate 80. So that's what the negative PDO does, it affects the jet stream. If you look at the latest values now, the negative PDO has completely collapsed. We're almost back to neutral. That is a huge change that has come out in the last week. World Climate Services, they posted it on Twitter, and I posted in my update on my Twitter page. It is a huge change which has happened. And if we go into even if we stay neutral PDO for this winter, that's something we haven't seen in 3 or 4 years. That means you're going to have ridges on the west coast of North America, which means you're going to be colder in the eastern U.S., just as a general rule. And God help us if we go into sustained positive PDO. It's going to be a very different winter if we do that. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen yet, but if that happens, we go to positive PDO this winter. It's not going to be your mild winter anymore, folks. That's not going to happen.
Mr. Rayo, jump in, please, Mr. Rayo.
I have said here on Joe and Joe in recent weeks that I'm not into, as Dave is and maybe Bill and other forecasters, and looking at the ENSO patterns and whatever, or sunspots. I just look at numbers. And what I've been saying for a while now is that in those few winters where we've had really a paucity of snow at Central Park, and last winter was certainly 2.3 inches, was the all-time record, broke the all-time record of 1972-73. But whenever we have winters like that, the very next winter, say what you will, but the very next winter, at least at Central Park, the winter or at least snowfall comes back like gangbusters. And who's to say that after what we went through last winter, that we might be looking at a winter this upcoming season, November, December, January, February, where we're going to be seeing more than a few heavy snowfalls in New York City, and possibly seeing the snow amounts for the season reach 25, 30, maybe even 40 inches. I mean, we have a very small sample. We've only had like 4 of the winters besides last winter where we've seen this, but every year, the year after we've had a lack of any snow in New York, in Central Park, the next year, boom, you could, as Casey Stengel used to say, you could look it up. And I did, and I'm riding on that assumption that we're going to see quite a bit of snow in the New York metropolitan area this year, for nothing else, because of the numbers game.
Dave, I put up the Pacific Ocean sea surface temperature anomalies. This was this was as of either yesterday or the day before, and just to illustrate what you're saying with regards to the warmer than normal ocean water temperatures that are in, for just about all of the Pacific. There are two small cold pools, and I wonder if
Yes.
you haven't would attach any significance to
Oh, yeah.
the cold
Yeah.
pool that's off the coast of the Northeast Pacific, and the other cold pool that runs
Off of Baja.
Baja and goes, it's north of Hawaii.
That is a huge aspect to this. We talk about a lot in the commodity markets. That pool of cold water, which exists from Baja out towards Hawaii, just north of El Nino. Now that is that's a relatively recent climate thing. Bill may know about this. It's called the negative PMM, negative Pacific Meridional Mode. There's one in the Atlantic and one in the Pacific. In the Atlantic, it means that the water temperatures from the equator into the tropics are really warm between Africa and South America. And if you look at this hurricane season, you've seen that it's an extra source of energy. And when the tropics get really warm everywhere. So that's the positive phase of the Atlantic meridional mode, the AMN. There's a negative phase to that too, when the Atlantic is really cold. And the Pacific is the same thing, off of Baja, California, down towards Hawaii. Now, right now, it's in the cold phase or negative. And what that does is that suppresses the El Nino. That's why the El Nino is having trouble getting started and kicking in. As long as that cold water is off the coast of Baja, it's a negative PMM and it shuts it down. So now, on the other hand, last year, in the autumn and the winter, we also had that cold water off of Baja, but it was working with the La Nina. You had a cold water and a cold water pool, and it really enhanced the La Nina. Here, the cold water pool, the PMM, the negative phase, is suppressing the El Nino to some degree, and it's preventing it from impacting it like it should in the atmosphere. Yeah, that's very important. That pool of cold water off of Baja, that's a big deal.
Okay, good. I was trying to figure out. And thank you for clearing that up for me, because I wasn't 100% sure what the impacts with that, because it's kind of weird. You got the whole ocean is above normal, and you got these two, you got that little strip there, and then you got that other little pocket there in the Northeast Pacific. Bill Goodman, would you like to discuss, because I know we talk about the state of the polar vortex. Any ideas on I always like to watch the polar vortex until it gets to December, and then you just wait for it to wrap up like a tight little ball, like it did last year or the year before. But I'm just wondering if you have some early thoughts. And I know you also follow Siberian snow cover, which is another thing that gets brought up this time of year. So maybe you could share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, you and I we've been talking recently about, I guess, some kind of disruption to the polar vortex. Maybe not a split, but like some kind of elongation, and that is probably going to I don't know. I forget. I was just reading Judah Cohen's blog, and I forget what he had said about how it would impact the eastern U.S. I think he did mention something about below normal temperatures coming back at some point with that. To be honest, I've been paying more attention to what's been going on in Siberia, and I mean, I don't know if you have the Rutgers snow map up. The last time I looked, it looked like snowfall was below normal, at least in western Siberia, pretty much close to normal elsewhere. But models, they keep arguing for a comeback. So we're gonna have to wait and see what the next week to 10 days brings, and see if we can recover some. And a lot of that looked like it was pretty far south, longer south to 60 north. So that, where that falls might be significant.
Right. They definitely are showing a big comeback here in the last week or so. We'll see if that actually happens. It's gotten a little better, but we'll see what happens the next week. It shows up.
Now, to be fair, we should. I have to point out that the Siberian snow cover concept and the indicator seemed to work until everybody started paying attention to it, and then for the last last 3 or 4 years, it hasn't worked at all.
Right.
So,
my view on the thing is the Siberian snow cover. It's a variable. It's not. Is it more powerful than El Nino or La Nina? Probably not. Okay, but if you had a neutral conditions in like neutral or weak El Nino or weak La Nina, then I think the snow cover in October and November to some degree probably has a bigger impact. That's my view on it. That's why sometimes it works some winters and sometimes it doesn't. I think it depends on what else is going on in the atmosphere. That's just my view.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm thinking a few winters back there was a winter where it actually helped strengthen the Pacific jet, and you just had a fire hose across the Pacific, and
Yeah.
that didn't help us any.
No,
I forget exactly which year, but a recent one.
A couple
Well,
of go ahead, Dave.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The other thing I'm not to mention is that the QBO is very solidly negative. The quasi-biennial oscillation, and the research is quite clear that negative QBO values up to -20 would enhance the blocking patterns in the Arctic regions. So that's also another factor going into the winter, as long as it doesn't tank like the -24, -25. But as long as it's like -19, -20, a lot of those winters have had tremendous blocking patterns. So that's another good variable for us as well.
Joe, do you have a thought? Because there are a couple of questions on the chat board, but I want to give you some room to jump in here.
Well, I mean, I've been looking at, first of all, I had a chance last night to look at Dave's synopsis or dissertation about the upcoming winter season. My God, Dave, 59 pages.
Oh, I believe me. I could.
No wonder, Dave, you asked me how much time do we have.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a tome, T-O-M-E. That
I like to write and I like to teach. I mean, but whatever.
But you know,
I look at as much as I can and take it apart, and then I have these ideas, and then I said to myself, okay, let's base the assumption that all my ideas are full of crap. But why am I right? So I start from that point. I always assume that anything I think about is completely wrong, and I have to build a case for it as a positive. Yeah.
Well, Bill Kirk of Weather Trends 360. I don't know if you're aware of that company.
Yes.
But he's saying that the current El Nino, is going to rapidly ramp up and reach its peak in mid to late November, and then will just as rapidly diminish through the course of early to midwinter. And because of that, he's saying that this is going to be probably the snowiest winter that we have had around here, with lots of nor'easters over the last compared to the last 10 years. Meantime, NOAA is saying that the El Nino is going to just slowly ramp up and peak out sometime between March and May of next year. So
that's completely
correct. Different ideas or concepts as to.
Don't hold back, Dave. Just go right at it.
Go at it.
Go at it.
The thing is, none of the data actually shows that. If you look at the CFS, which only goes to 1.5, 1.7, it's almost at a peak now, and then it shows rapid falling. Kirk is correct. The captain, they call him the commodity markets. They call him Captain Kirk. It falls off in January and February. The European shows the same thing. The Japanese model is the same. So the idea, what NOAA's doing here is NOAA's taking the standard. I think that's what they're doing. They're taking the standard El Nino model, which often keeps going till February, March, and then it begins to weaken. That might be correct. I'm not saying it's wrong, but the model data isn't showing that. I'm just putting it out there.
All right.
So that's why you have the conflict there, Joe, because the model data and the standard El Nino aren't matching.
Well, I will say that I've heard from a number of different forecasters or whatever about El Nino that if you really want a snowy winter here in the Northeast, you want either a moderate or even better, a weak El Nino. So
yes.
If Kirk is correct and we peak sometime in November and we're on the decline, and we have a far weaker El Nino to deal with in January or February, that would seem to suggest, again, a rather snowy. Meantime, NOAA's forecast of long range shows the Northeast in an above normal pattern with slightly above normal precipitation. You look at that and you say, oh, well, it looks like the National Weather Service is going for more rain than snow this year. And I have a feeling that if indeed Kirk is correct, and those who are saying that things are going to slide on down after next month, a lot of people are going to remember. Same way they remembered the NOAA forecast from last year when they said it was going to be a drier than normal winter out in the southwestern states based upon a La Nina, and that never happened. As you know, we had 13 atmospheric rivers hit California. So everybody's saying, oh my God, that was a horrible forecast they put out. And now people are banking on a mild, more wet than white winter here in the East. And who knows, that may put another big dent in the credibility of NOAA's long-range forecast before this winter is over.
I would.
I was going to say.
I would take that with a serious grain of salt, though, because just because we're and NOAA even talked about the climate. NOAA climate folks even talked about this in a press conference they did with releasing the winter outlook. They said just because we're forecasting greater than normal chances of above normal temperatures, that doesn't say when the cold air is going to be in place.
And I've made that argument.
The timing is everything.
You're absolutely correct, because and Dave mentioned this at the top of the show when he was going through some of the great El Nino years. He mentioned the winter of 82, 83. The winter of 82, 83 was one of the warmest El Nino years in half a century. And yet, when you look back upon that, if you ask the average person, well, what do you think about that winter? Man, it was a terrible winter because of one huge snowstorm, the megalopolitan snowstorm of February 11th and 12th, 1983, 1 to 2 feet of snow from Washington all the way up to Boston. And
Richmond.
And that was, as Joe, as you just mentioned, Bill, I mean, in a relatively warm winter, we had one cold, high-pressure cell drifting over the Northeast at the same time that a storm was coming up from the south, and boom, they came together, and we got walloped.
And also, Joe, don't forget the 2015-16 El Nino, same thing.
Same thing.
Snowstorm at the end of January. Originally, New York City wasn't going to get that much, and the short-range models blew the snow into New York City. But that hit everybody from North Carolina and Virginia all the way up to New York City. One big snowstorm in the warm winter, which was also a super strong El Nino, just like 82, 83.
And that's I call that the NAM storm, because the global models were going like 3 to 5 or 4 to 8 inches for that storm in New York. And time after time after time, looking at the NAM FOOS in New York, I'm looking at this and saying, what is this? 20, 25, 30 inches of snow? What are they, crazy? What are they, crazy? What are they, nuts or whatever like that? And like 6 hours before the storm, the first flake started to fall, all of a sudden, the global model said, hey, yeah, it's going to be the NAM is right.
The NAM.
Dave, I have to give you credit for that, because you always used to say time and time again with a storm like that, the polar jet and the GFS is always too strong and suppresses things too much. You got to bring it north. And that
we had a storm like that in December here in Virginia, North Carolina, December 9th, 2018, where the GFS is going 1 to 3 for Richmond and like 3 to 6 on the North Carolina border, everything south of it. Meanwhile, if you look at the NAM, the 3-kilometer NAM, the RGM, the WRF, they were all like 15, 16 inches in Richmond up to Charlottesville, almost to Fredericksburg. And local guys here, the GFS, the NWS here, would not go above the GFS. They just hugged that thing like it was the last one on Earth. And they would not leave. And then a few hours later, suddenly the GFS went 4 to 8 the last run. I'm like, wait a second, it's going that way. And we ended up getting 15 to 16 inches in Richmond.
And the thing about
putting out these snow maps, and people like, they tell you nuts
well,
the snow map. And one of the TV guys said, the weather models, they often show 12 inches of snow, but how often does that happen in Richmond? Really, that happens very often. On the other hand, if we get 1 inch of snow, how often do we actually end up getting 12 inches of snow? That never happens. So don't worry, this is a non-event.
Oh, well. Well, the 15-16 storm did two things. One is that it saved the NAM's life because it was on its deathbed, and it's still with us. And I assume, Bill Goodman, it's still with us for a while. You haven't heard any rumors of them getting rid of it?
I hope so.
Unless it's not in a new budget.
Be a big outcry if it goes away. The
funny thing about that 2016 storm is that it made believers out of so many people with the NAM. And now, whenever we had even the slightest chance of an impending big storm, let's say 8 days down the road or 7 days down the road, I'd get on Facebook and Twitter or whatever like that. Hey, Joe, what does the NAM say? Well, I'd say the NAM doesn't go any further out than 84 hours, so you'll have to wait.
On the other hand, Joe, how many times we were sitting across of us, because Joe and I sat across from each other for over 2 years when we worked together at FiOS, and would wait for models to come in. How many times did I utter those two words? Do you remember those two words? Da NAM. Da NAM. Joe, none of the models are.
I thought you were going to say La Plume.
No, La Plume is the other thing, but no.
When you hear both of those together, that's when you know it's going to be big.
All right, let me get these two questions out. Okay, so Dave, Jess Harden is on the chat board, and he's a semi-regular here, and
Okay.
He lives in the he lives in the snow capital of the South, in northern Alabama, and he would like to know. He asks, um, polar vortex, moderate El Nino. What does the potential setup that you see? And we should really kind of get into your forecast. How what you're looking at. Not all 59 pages, please, but the highlights. Um,
Yeah.
but the combinations that you see with regards to the El Nino, the polar vortex, and everything else, what that might mean for winter in the deep south.
Sure. Well, always in the deep south, it's always an elevation event. So if you're in northern Alabama where you have decent elevation, this setup, I believe, is pretty good. We're already seeing a lot of southern storms, a lot of nor'easters, as you guys have noted, a lot of rain on the East Coast. We've already had like three sustained nor'easters, maybe four at this point. We've had a lot of stuff. So the southern jet is there. As long as the southern jet is not a blowtorch, as long as it's going warp 1 or warp 2, it's not doing warp 9. Okay, as long as it's got some energy into it, and you get to more severe blocking, you do have a pretty good chance of seeing some above average snowfall in northern Alabama, northern Georgia, where you are, Joe, Tennessee, North Carolina. I like all those areas a lot. Far northern Mississippi. I think all areas have for those guys, a pretty good chance for either normal or above normal snowfall. I like those areas a lot in this kind of pattern, as long as El Nino doesn't explode and overpower everything. And we should know that. And I think we're almost at the end of November, right? So almost at the end of October. So we should know that certainly by the beginning of December. Now, when it comes to December, I'm not particularly bullish about December. Often December El Ninos, and I'm sure Bill knows this, is often very mild in the eastern U.S. as a rule. That's just one of those things. But on the other hand, and also climatologically speaking, the eastern U.S. has not seen a lot of cold December since 2000. Over the last 20 years, we have not seen a lot of cold Decembers. Most of the Decembers tend to run mild. On the other hand, March has a tendency of becoming a continuation of February. So when I started out doing this stuff in the commodities, everybody was in the Midwest and the Tennessee Valley stuff. They were planning stuff by late March. Now nobody even begins until the baseball season starts because it's just always cold and wet and snowy. So March is really, in my view,
doesn't the baseball season start in late March?
No, it's the beginning. It's talking about really April 1st now.
Yeah.
I mean, so
I know because we have frost down here till even into early May.
Yeah. But in terms of getting the soil drying out, but getting the ground temperatures warm enough to start planting stuff, nobody does that now anymore until the middle of April. March is just constant. The shift in March over the last 20, 25 years has been quite noticeable in terms of temperatures and storminess and soil temperatures being too cold. That's my argument about the South.
Okay. And the other question is from Janet Dunn, who is also here. She's on the board from time to time. Hi, Janet. And she asks, what would be the timing? Because you mentioned about the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. What would be the timing for the change in the PDO, if there is a change, to affect, downwind?
Yeah.
Are we thinking December or after that?
November, December. Let's just see if it gets into, stays neutral in November, December, because it's almost neutral now. So if it can stay that way, and I'm keeping my expectations low. It'd be great if we can get positive PDO, but let's just hope for neutral. Let's just keep it reasonable. Let's hope it's neutral, because neutral allows all sorts of possibilities. But I would think November, December. We should know by middle of December, by Christmas, whether the PDO is actually going to stay neutral or go positive by then, I would think.
All right, why don't you go ahead, Dave, and I'm going to turn the share capabilities on. So if you want to share some of your graphics and
okay, let me do share screen here.
All right,
not
hold
all
on.
59 pages though.
Yes.
Yeah. Everyone's a comedian.
We love you, Dave.
Yeah, who doesn't? Yeah.
How much time have you got?
Yeah, really. So can you guys see this?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. So just briefly here, I start off these different sections. Again, for those, you can go to the website. You can see it on the website. It's also on the Facebook page, on the Twitter page. But this is, this is just to show you the snow drought over the past 13 years. This is up through 2020, 21. And it's not just the Midwest, folks. It's not just the Northeast. It's everywhere. I mean, look at Iowa and Nebraska. Those areas usually get a lot of snow. So it's bad everywhere. This was the winter 2018-19, probably last good winter. And the snow, this is total snowfall for the winter. But then you can see this is 2019-2020. This is way below normal. There's the anomaly in the lower left. You can see the anomalies there in the mid-Atlantic. Not so much New England, but New York down to Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky. The European model correctly predicted the snow anomalies for that month, for that year. Did a really good job with that. This is the winter of 2021. And again, the upper left, there was the European and British climate model for the winter. And you see all the reds there, which represent below normal snowfall. And sure enough, that's exactly what we saw on the bottom right. So the climate models did a very good job there. And then this is 21-22. You can see again the snow anomalies. This is the first year of the La Nina, classic La Nina pattern here. So the farmers' almanacs every year. This is the 21-22 winter. Look at this. It's cold and snowy, cold and snowy. It didn't happen. A complete bust.
Well, this year the old farmers' almanac. For the winter season, they had practically the entire United States.
Yes,
white.
I know. Yeah, I got it here, Joe. There's the one for the both of them.
How is that possible?
Ones you can see it.
How is that even possible?
I don't know. And the problem is that it gets all this free publicity, when it comes out in the news stations about it. And of course, actually, parenthetically, kind of damages the science because people think this stuff is real. They don't know it's just Bravo Sierra. So. And then you get hype stuff like
they have other interesting things in the old farmer's almanac, like when is the best time of year to castrate your cow?
Yes, they do.
A bull, castrate your bull. You can't castrate a cow.
A week from Wednesday at 1:10. That'll be the best time.
when the moon is in the full phase. There you go.
Right.
So and then you get this stuff here. Really, the guy last winter predicted 4 feet of snow from Wisconsin to Virginia for the total. Come on, really? Okay, then you get this, look at the big snowstorms, right? Where all the subscriptions and all the snow lovers live. I mean, come on. So this was the El Nino last September. You can see it. The La Nina last year, just to show you what it looked like. And then what happened during the year, you can see there's the La Nina. And then in the area in the black, you can see the cold water developing off the coast of Alaska and Canada and the United States, which is the negative PDO. So you have the negative PDO and the La Nina, and they just screw the eastern United States in terms of snowfall big time. And you can see La Nina's here. This is another way of doing it. This is from Golden Gate Weather Services. They have 2 charts here. This one is from 1950 to 89. And the area in black, that was a 3-year long La Nina. And it was 72, 73, 73, 74, 75, 76. And those 3 years generally for Eastern U.S. were all bad winters. And then this here was...
Well, by bad winter, you mean what? You mean below par. Below par, yes.
Yeah. Okay. The awful things where more normal people like, which, and then this is the El Nino here, the recent ones from 1999 to present. And again, back in, we had a 3-year long La Nina, and back in just before the turn of the century, you can see there. And that was also, a problem. So La Ninas don't do great. A typical La Nina does this sort of thing. This is what La Nina does. You have a trough on the west and Pacific Northwest. You have a ridge that runs generally from Texas to Virginia. And of course, that means above normal temperatures and below normal snowfall. And you can see what it looks like here. Look at those temperatures last winter. That matches the La Nina. That's the jet stream pattern. That's it. So that's what we had last winter. And then this is to show you the numbers here. You can see this is 2020-23. That at the bottom left is the snow anomaly map from the New York Times, and you can see how unbelievably awful the snow was. In the western United States, it was just massive. All the drought was completely wiped out. So this is the current Farmer's Almanac that Joe's referring to. Look at this. Holy, come on, really?
Okay. Was the vortex drop down? Does the polar vortex drop to Kansas to produce that?
Yeah, really. Drops into my kitchen.
Exactly.
Now, this is the La Nina. This is where it is right now. This is the Eastern Pacific Ocean. This is important. This is October 5. So you see La Nina, that's area B, right? Okay, you see the area C in green? That's the cold water we're talking about off of Baja, California. That's the negative PMM. That's what's interfering with La Nina. And to show you what this looks like, here's a schematic of it. So there's the negative PMM on the left-hand side. The one on the right-hand side is the Atlantic. But you can see in the positive phase, there's warm water off the coast of Baja down towards Hawaii. Okay, and that's the positive phase. But what we're dealing with is the negative phase, which is what this is, the cold water there. And that cold water is interfering with the El Nino. Here is the PDO. We talked about that. This is brand new. This is since November. See the cold water all the way through since November, right? Now look at the right-hand side of that slide. See how it's exploded back towards neutral? This tells you that the PDO is coming, the negative PDO is coming to an end. That's what this is showing. So this is from the World Climate Service, very important graph here. So we'll see if that holds up or not. Okay, this is the drought monitor map. This is from last summer. My spring forecast here. You can see on the precipitation anomalies on the upper left for the summer. Generally, you have really wet conditions in the Midwest here when you have El Nino, and you have cool conditions. And for what we saw, the drought. This is the drought. This is from September 5. You don't normally have that in the Midwest El Nino. This is a really so significant. And of course, the hurricane season. Look at this. This is not a normal El Nino hurricane season. That's not a normal hurricane. It just isn't. Okay. The climate models are showing this, but let me just go to the more recent one. Well, here you go. This is from September and then October. September's on the left-hand side, October's on the right-hand side. The brown line in these graphs is 2 degrees centigrade. So you notice that in October, they're showing all the lines except for one of them are now well below 2 degrees centigrade. And they show a much sharper drop. Here's another example of it. This is the European model. Okay, the green line there is 2 degrees centigrade. The red solid line is the mean, and the black is last month's, September's prediction. So they're all coming down. As we go towards El Nino, they're dropping. And you can see the rapid drop-off in January and February. Okay.
That's what Bill Kirk is talking about.
Yes, that's correct. This is what El Nino does. The moderate El Nino does in terms of temperatures. Okay, and you've got 8 of them there. And you can see, for the most part, in the eastern United States, the only one that produced warm temperatures of the moderates was the winter of 2018-19. All the other ones were El Ninos, which were moderate, which were not bad. And here's the precipitation. Again, along the East Coast, only the one from 88, 89 produced below normal precipitation on the East Coast. Now, there are some dryness problems in the Midwest, but not on the East Coast. This is El Nino. This is from Brian Brettschneider in Alaska, the climatologist. This is what snowfall typically does, and I blew this up so you can see it more clearly here. Here we go. Percent average snowfall during moderate El Ninos. And you can see that in Virginia, western North Carolina, northern Georgia, okay, even into northern Alabama, up towards New York City, the blue area is above normal snowfall. Okay, that's what that generally does. Now, this is the important point here, slide this one here. This is the MEI, okay? So, to show you what this looks like, okay, the red lines are El Ninos, and the blue spikes are La Ninas, okay? And you see the scale here on the left-hand side. So, the spiked lettered A, that is the 82, 83 El Nino. You see how it got up almost 3.0? And then you see the one B and C and D. The D one is the 97, 98 El Nino. See that? E, that's the 2015, 16 El Nino. Okay. Now, look at F, the green on the far right. That's where it is right now. That's not where it should be for a normal El Nino. That's way off. Another example of it. Let me show you this slide here. This is, again, a lot of people have been talking about a strong El Nino or a super El Nino. Okay, a lot of that comes from the summer climate models, which have turned out to be Bravo Sierra. But here we go. We compare the black line is the MEI right now. That's 3 super El Ninos. 82, 83 is the orange line. 97, 98 is the red line. 2016 is the brown line. Look how much different this is. This is nowhere close to a super El Nino. Not even close. Okay. Here is the moderate El Nino. Now this matches. Okay, these are all fairly close, 94, 95. The great winter of 2009, 2010. Hello, boys and girls. 86, 87 was a great winter. Okay, 2002, 2003. All good matches. And then finally, the last one here is weak El Nino. Also all matches. Look at that. So clearly, this El Nino, this MEI, is much closer to a moderate or weak El Nino than a super strong one. That's just not a, again, you can't argue against this. This is, no, that's not, it's not a super, it's not a strong El Nino. Now, you may call it that if you want to, which is fine, but if you use the MEI, that says your forecast is not going to work out. Here's another way of looking at it. Again, this is from the climate prediction. I think it's NCDC, and this plots several El Ninos of the past, and you can see the black line is where we are now. And we're way below where we should be. Way below. So there's the data. And the reason why this is important here, the MEI. Okay. So the image on the left are temperatures. When you have a MEI that stays below 1.0 for the winter, okay, that's your temperatures. All right. And then the one on the right-hand side is the same thing for January, February, March, the second half of the winter. So that's pretty good. And here is the precipitation. Okay. Midwest is pretty dry. The East Coast does okay. But the temperatures are really much colder on a fairly weak MEI. This is the QBO. Again, just explain what it is. Here's the eastern phase of it. And this is, a lot of people have talked about this on the internet. You can see that the QBO, when it's easterly phase, you get generally colder winters. And then the other thing is, just to go through it quickly here, these are the climate models from October. This is from Ben Knoll, okay? And this is for the heart of the winter. So the dark red areas represent blocking. Now, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit so we can see it here. Maybe I can blow this up. So you can see it. There you go. And you can see, let me get rid of the text. Delete, there you go. There you go. So you have 8 different climate models. The dark red represents blocking patterns. And you can see all these models are showing very strong blocking, except for one, which is the NSEP model. Okay. All the other ones have really nice blocking patterns, which, and you can see the active southern jet stream in the blue colors. That's, that's the gangbusters. This was the European climate model from October, January, February, March. Now, there were two. The one on the left, is December. Then the one on the right is January. The one on the bottom is February. So initially, you can see the trough is kind of in the Rockies in the plain states, so we're not that cold. And then it shifts to the central eastern U.S. for the second half of the winter. Look at here's precipitation anomalies, the British model and the European model. Look at the precip anomalies along the East Coast and the southeastern states. If you get any cold air here at all, that's a lot of that snow. So that's pretty good here. The other thing which is important is the Japanese climate model came out last week. And if I can blow this up a little bit, I want to show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so this is for January. And what's interesting here is that the upper right map, that's the 500 millibar. Look at the strong blocking in Greenland and the strong negative anomaly along the East Coast for January. That's really impressive. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Dave.
Doesn't mean it's right. It just looks impressive.
Yeah, Dave.
And the other thing that's so nice about this is that this is the December Japanese model on the right-hand side. So I took December, okay, European, and I compared it to the Japanese, and they look the same. You see where the blue area is, the Rockies and the Plain States is almost identical. So you're having the Japanese model matching the European model for December. That's a good sign. That's consistency.
Dave, can you just, the MEI, what is that?
Multivariate ENSO index.
Okay. Tom Contino.
Multivariate ENSO index.
All right. Let me just stop you for 1 second. I just want to acknowledge.
That's really about it. So I just,
okay.
That's pretty much it. So.
Okay. So let me just take the opportunity right now. I just want to thank those who hit the tip jar tonight. Raymond O'Hara started it off. Thank you, Raymond. Quiet John, as always. Quiet John. It gets Joe and I to look at the left side of the menu versus the right side. Thank you, Quiet John. David Schwartz, Leon Probitsky, and the chairman, Scott Briller, all hitting a super chat tonight. And their comments. So David Schwartz brings up, there was that volcanic eruption in Tonga. And
Tonga eruption, sure.
Right. And there was I also read in a couple of places how it might have added an extra degree of warming to the global temperature. And I was, always wondering, is that still part of the equation? Is Tonga still affecting? Is that eruption still affecting the state of the atmosphere?
It's a wild card. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation going back and forth on it. It may have affected last year. As it slowly works its way to the atmosphere, the decreasing impact of it may have a different impact on the atmosphere this year. So I don't know. It's a wild card. It absolutely is a wild card.
And
Good question. I don't know the answer to it.
Okay.
And the problem also is that it's basically a southern hemisphere, not a northern hemisphere phenomena, but mostly southern hemisphere.
Right.
And it wasn't even your standard volcanic eruption. It was an undersea volcanic eruption, which may have so powerful that it may have put quite a bit of water vapor into the atmosphere, especially across the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
The chairman, Scott Briller, asks, well, he points out, he says, Philadelphia has had 4 consecutive winters of below average snowfall. They have not recorded an inch of snow since January 29th, 2022. Okay.
Yes.
Which is a record for them. Some people are saying, some people are saying that Philadelphia is in a snow hole or in a snow drought. And well, southeast Pennsylvania is, when you look at the normal stats, if you look at all the climate, the snowfall stats around southeast PA, there is the normals go down there. They go up just to the west, they go up just to the northeast, but right in that pocket they go down because of the fact that you get systems that come east and they die out in the mountains and then redevelop offshore. Philadelphia is in one of those funny spots where it misses both. It doesn't get the precip that dries out, and it's usually too far southwest to tap in on the redevelopment.
Yeah, no, they're definitely in a snow drought, as is DC, as is Baltimore, as is Richmond, as Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, Roanoke, on and on and on. It was definitely in a snow drought. But I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident that Philadelphia will probably break the snow drought and get close to normal and maybe even above normal snowfall this year. About as confident I am as winning Game 7.
Okay. Brandon Doherty just hit the tip jar too, saying he wants to buy you a cup of coffee, Dave. Thank you, Brandon. Most appreciated. Bill Goodman.
Okay.
Bill Goodman. Yeah. I know you tend to dominate these shows with just talking nonstop. But so, your thoughts on this?
Oh, I mean, I think that Dave, you did a great job with this presentation, and I've been paying attention to what the European had been predicting there, for going into January, especially January and February. It looks like you got above normal heights up near Greenland, some blocking. I don't know if it's original on the West Coast or like a negative EPO that even tries to develop there in the modeling in February. I mean, to see that kind of a signal in smoothed out ensemble data, I mean that makes it a little bit more significant than just it stands out. It stands out. So it's gonna be fun to watch this all unfold.
Dave.
Yeah. The other thing is November 5, first week of November, the new climate models come out.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be important to see. If you want to see if these climate models are still holding what they were showing in September and October.
Well, that's
the important thing.
Well, now that you bring that up, because I was going to ask you about this, let me find it here. Give me 1 second. I don't know.
Okay, sir.
Was it the cans? Let's see, was it the? There's just bear with me for a moment here.
Okay.
See if it was this one. It might have been the can sips.
Yes.
Okay, there's the can sips, and I was looking. This was on the October forecast. So
right.
So the can sips actually was pretty interesting because it's got higher than normal heights for November nothing crazy. I mean, it just got higher heights in the east and slightly lower heights in the west. But then it's got for December, it's got below normal heights, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina,
it's
South
bombing everybody.
Right.
It's going crazy.
Right. And then January, and I'm going to put this, let me put this on the screen so everybody can see the upper air with this. January, I mean, it's got the, below normal heights everywhere from central New Jersey south. I mean, just draw a line, say, right along 40 degrees north across the United States, and everybody south of there with below normal heights, and everybody, north right along the immediate U.S. border going up into Canada with above normal heights. I mean, this was when I saw this initially, I thought this was a pretty interesting scenario that would set up for the winter time. And then February, the whole East was below normal height wise, and so was March. I mean, this one models. So how much faith do you put in to the CanSIPs?
From my point of view, it's one of the models that I use. It's not the best. It's not the worst. To me, what's important is that it really jumps on the January, February, March thing like the European does and the Japanese model does. That's the important thing.
You think it's plausible then?
Yes. Okay. Now, if it's still doing it, if the European is still doing this, the Japanese and the Canadian models doing this in the first week of November, then it's time for me to go to the store and get new underwear. Yeah. Because this is going to be an exciting winter.
Well, that's an interesting visual. And what about the NMME long range model? What are your thoughts on there?
It's such a conglomeration. They use like 9 different models, and they all have completely different solutions. I do not use it for much. I'm not. The thing I often think I use it for is the El Nino.
I often think when you look, these models that take basically take a conglomeration of models and show you an average, really all that does is give you average results. I mean, if you want average results, you look at something that creates averages. That doesn't really help you. And then, of course, there's the CFS, which only goes, there's the monthly, I have the monthly CFS here. So this was issued on the, now, this thing seems to run like a couple of times a day or something. I mean, how reliable, and then it doesn't change very much. And
it runs. There are several different ways you can look at the CFS. Now, if you go to Tropical Tidbit sites, it's run like every 6 hours, something like that.
Which is what I have up on the screen.
But there's one site out of Colorado which runs it once a week, and it uses all the data from the past week, so you get a more solid presentation when it comes out on Sunday night and Monday.
Oh, okay.
But it only comes out once a week. So there's that. There's the CFS, which comes out weekly. Where it gives you a weekly synopsis about what the overall pattern looks like. So you can, the thing about it, it's monthly. I'm not particularly impressed with the CFS monthly beyond like 2 or 3 months, but that's true with any climate model. I mean, the good thing about it is that it runs all the time, so you can see trends. That's the good thing about it. You can see trends. The European model only comes out once a month, so it's hard to see trends with that. So, you have to look at it and realize what it's there for. The CFS, for me, the advantage of it is you get to see the trends over the time frame, which is good to see. And some of the other climate models, yes, I wish the European climate model came out more than once a month. It doesn't.
When during the month does it come out?
It comes out the 5th of the month.
The 5th.
November 5th.
So we'll have to wait for November.
Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but the European weekly model is now running every day on one particular website. Weather Bell has the European weekly model after 6 weeks every day.
Oh, okay. And so, six weeks would take us now to into the first part of December.
December 10 right now.
Have you seen the week? Have you seen that run of weeklies?
Yes, I have.
And
it's nicer than my last date. Let's put it that way.
It's nicer than your last. Okay. I'll go with that. Bill.
It has a signal. It has a signal for a lot of above normal blocking in late November, December. Moderate sized trough in the Midwest, Mississippi over to the Appalachians. It's got some ridging on the West Coast. It's not bad. It's not bad. It doesn't suck.
All right.
It doesn't suck.
So would you just going back to what somebody posted, what someone said earlier about the I get when people put up these sort of general statements, and I wonder sometimes where they get their information from. So, for example, the other night, and I wound up throwing this guy off the board and blocking him from the show because he misrepresented. He went. I don't know if you know Eric Snodgrass.
Yes, I know.
You
Eric's a
know,
great guy.
and I have to tell you, I don't know, Dave, if you saw, Joe, I sent you the link to that video. I don't know if you got to see it.
Yes.
Dave, I don't know if you saw it. I watched it, and I was, I was mesmerized by his analysis. I mean, he really did. I thought he did a very good job
Yes, he's
explaining.
a great man.
But the thing was that this person misrepresented what he said. And he came on the chat board, and this guy always puts stuff up like last year it was that the East was in a 20-year drought, and he just kind of posts this stuff over and over again. And I warned him and warned him. The other day he said that Eric Snodgrass said that there was going to be a ridge in the eastern part of the United States for the whole winter. And I went and looked at his videos. I went and looked specifically at that winter forecast video. He said nothing like that. I mean, it was nothing at all like that. So I told the guy off and I threw him off. So I'm making this longer than it needs to be. So I just want to go back to the point that someone earlier said about long range models showing the NAO going positive in the month of November. I mean, I don't see it. I certainly didn't see that today going out 16 days.
No, I don't see it either. In fact, let me take a look-see here. Teleconnect on let's see, extended weekly. Temperature lines. This takes us to 20 minutes. Yeah, the weekly has it almost completely neutral all the way through the month, all the way through November.
All right.
And then it has a slight rise towards positive in the first couple of days of December. But
big deal. Big deal.
I don't think there is some progress being made on forecasting the overall NAO for the winter, the pattern, but it's not progress substantially can lock in. So right. I don't, I look after 30 days, but I don't give the NAO any credence beyond 3 weeks because I don't think you can get it more accurate any further than that.
And the NAO, for those of you who don't know, even though we say that we throw that acronym, that's the North Atlantic oscillation. So higher than normal pressures in the North Atlantic around from eastern North America all the way to Europe, and that includes Greenland. Mr. Goodman, would you agree with me? As I have also argued that the obsession with the NAO is overstated, and people seem to think that that's the only way that we get winter weather in the eastern part of the United States. And Dave, I remember. Go ahead, Bill.
Definitely not. I mean, how many times it's nice. I think that the phase change of the NAO is probably more important than its actual value anyway. That's when you get storms. I mean, we've looked at you can get blocking in other parts of the high latitude. You get the EPO that's that usually throws us more cold air than stormy weather. But there's many different ways to go, many different ways to get winter weather. And you were talking about the NAO, I guess maybe going neutral. Looks like the AO during that time probably stays negative the whole time. And if the NAO stays in tandem with that, maybe that the idea of persistence is with the NAO is a better way to go.
By the way, either of you, Dave or Bill, because the EPO chart, and they got, the Weather Service got rid of it. Does anybody know where we could get an EPO chart that I don't have to pay for?
No, that's not to pay for it. No. Weather Bell has it, and what you can do is you can look over the archives and build the trend over it. And they have model projections of the EPO going out to 2 weeks.
Do they have it available? But you have to pay for it. Right. I mean, because
I posted from time to time. The new Twitter page. I have a new Twitter page called Weather Risk Snowstorms. But the point about the NAO. Of course, you do not need a negative NAO to get a snowstorm or to get winter weather. No. Now, if you want, for the big ones, you want to have the negative NAO, you want to have the blocking, you want to have negative Arctic oscillations, but there's lots of ways that you can get moderate, 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 3 to 6 inch snows without having, the perfect upper atmosphere pattern. Now, the further south you are, the more important having those ingredients are, okay?
Right.
Because, if you're in New England, you can get coastal storms which bomb eastern New England, and you can have the NAO positive, the AO positive. Okay, but that's New England because they stick out like this, and then storms just hit them.
Right, and I mean, I always point to the winters of 12, 13. I'm sorry, the winters of 13, 14, and 14, 15, where it was all, pretty much the whole winter was with a positive NAO. Yeah, but it was there was some decent snow. There was some. I know certainly for Long Island there were a couple of foot plus snowstorms and all of that. And those 2 years, the EPO, which I have always argued that is the most important of all the teleconnections. That's the one you want to be negative. I'll take my chances with the NAO, and I'll take my chances with how much of a positive PNA we have. But if that EPO is negative, that puts you in the ball game for a lot of weather potential snow events. Certainly for, let's say, from I would say probably, if you're in the depth of the winter, you probably could go maybe down to Washington D.C., Northern Virginia, north and east. Maybe it's a little further north if the earlier part of the winter, but that negative EPO I think is that's the big player here.
Can I just
That's like get your cold air from. Yes.
I just want to show something that the chairman was talking about, asking if Philadelphia was in the middle of a snow hole, so to speak.
Do you want is it something for the screen, Joe?
No, I'm going to hold it up to the camera. I'm going to hold it up to the camera.
Okay.
Okay.
Joe, you and I have gone many years. Ironically, I think in 1983 you were down in in Corpus Christi, right?
Yes.
You missed the megalopolitan.
But I predicted it. I missed it, but I predicted it. Go on.
But as far as Philadelphia being in a snow hole is concerned now, I want to hold this up. This is from, remember Ray Wark? Remember the Sir Ray Wark or whatever they gave it? I'm going to hold this up and try to get it as close to the camera as possible. Can you read what the headline is on that?
No.
This one you will tell your children and grandchildren about.
This was from the Philadelphia Weather Service, 11:15 p.m., February 11th, 1983. As of 11 p.m., the blizzard of 1983 has dumped 21 inches of snow on Philadelphia International Airport. This ties the all-time record. By the way, they did break that record.
Yes, they did.
All-time record snowfall, which occurred December 25, 26, 1909. Snow will continue for another 2 or 3 hours before diminishing to light snow. By morning, it will taper off to flurries and end. The storm center is near Delaware now and will move north tonight to near Cape Cod by morning. Winds will continue strong overnight. Blowing and drifting snow will continue. Extremely hazardous driving conditions if you're going out tonight. All but emergency travel should be avoided. Our weather will improve Saturday as high pressure builds over the area. And it was signed by the forecaster for Philadelphia back then was Snyder. But anyway, I think Joe, you and I are now old enough to have at least grandchildren.
Yes.
I don't know about great-grandchildren yet, but, I mean, there you go. And I have all of the statements from this storm starting from the very beginning in a big, thick book. So when the chairman mentioned about, the lack of any snow in Philadelphia, I just had to go into my archives and pull this particular piece of teletype out to show everybody that, yes, it has happened and may very well happen again. I don't know when, but, there you go. 21 inches of snow in Philadelphia in one sitting.
Dave, Todd Keast, new to the chat board. Welcome, Todd. Glad you joined the conversation. With all the convection that seems to be happening around the dateline, is this El Nino acting like a west-based El Nino instead of an east-based El Nino, possibly a Mordecai El Nino? And if you could explain all of that, that would be great.
Yeah, the Mordecai El Nino is a Japanese term that means when the El Nino is not centered off the coast of Peru, which is an eastern-based El Nino. It means that the warmest water relative to normal is further towards the international date line, which is called a Central Pacific El Nino or a Mordecai El Nino. You can also have Mordecai La Ninas as well. So, but the Mordecai term is a Japanese term. At first, I thought it was referring to Godzilla, but it's not. It's referring to the
with or without
rising out of the ocean. Yeah,
the Godzilla with or without Raymond Burr.
Yeah, I don't either one. So, they always have the Japanese fishermen look at Godzilla. But sometimes I think, first time I heard it, I thought he said Modokai. I'm like, really? So obviously, the first person in the movie is obviously a climatologist, but it turned out I just heard it wrong. So that's a Modokai El Nino, and that's what that is. So the argument is that generally, Western-based El Ninos are much better for Eastern and Central U.S. winters than the Eastern-based one. And sometimes it can also migrate. It can start in the east, off of Peru, and then the warm waters can shift over time. So by the time you get to the middle of the winter, the warmest waters are by the date line, not off the coast of Peru. So that can happen as well. Now, there has been some speculation that that's going to happen yet. I've seen that speculation. It is possible. I haven't seen the trend yet show up yet, but that is another variable to keep in mind over the next 60 days and see if that happens.
Bill, I usually as we go through the 4 months, you come up with your thoughts with regards to the winter for the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states. Any ideas? Any ideas on where we're going with where we might go with this?
Well, I mean, I've been kind of basing my thing, acting as if this is going to be a typical strong El Nino event. That's clearly not the case. So anything I would have had to say, I'm going to have to rethink. And I had reserved, this early in the game in October, I usually don't get. I don't lock into a forecast anyway. Sometimes you even have to watch in November what's going to happen in terms of polar vortex disruptions, Pacific typhoons, how they might disrupt the pattern. This nice outlook that we set up for ourselves. You could get it spoiled early on in the game. I like Dave's ideas of treating this more like a moderate El Nino, and if that's the case, I think that plus some of the stuff I'd been seeing all along with the climate models that maybe we could do pretty well this winter. It's not going to be like last winter.
Yeah. Also, I just noticed in the chat somebody was talking about the MJO.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. Adam Lowe,
yeah.
Yes.
That is another indication that the El Nino is not normal, because typically what happens is the El Nino powers the MJO through the 8 different phases. So when the MJO is active, okay, well, phase 3 or 4, whatever, that's the warm, mild phase. So everybody stand down for the next 2 weeks. It's going into the mild phase. And then you can see when it's going to go into the cold phase. You could actually project it that way out to 2 or 3 weeks sometimes, the general trends.
Well,
but right now, if you look at the MJO and you look at the last 90 days, even 120 days, it's been stuck in the neutral circle.
Well,
that's not where it normally happens in MJO. So that's a clue that the MJO is not acting normally, because the El Nino is not acting normally.
No, and Eric Snodgrass in his analysis was talking about the fact that the tropical activity in the Indian Ocean has been
Yes.
off the wall. I mean, it's just been out of control.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Eric's a great guy, great meteorologist. I've done some of the conferences with him. Great guy. So yes, he knows the stuff. Absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts on the fact that I've noticed it with the GFS in particular, less so with the European, but the GFS seems to be, this month spinning things up in the Caribbean. Was it 2 days ago? It had a Cat 4 going into Cuba and all the rest of it. But even from say day 7 or 8 and beyond, I mean, it's spinning up. It seems to be impacting runs, with whatever's going on in North America, and I mean, I'm just trying to get a handle on that, because if there's going to be another tropical cyclone that's going to form, that's going to alter some of the short range stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I just use the GFS Ensemble and look and see where the cluster of activity is, and then if it's doing it several runs in a row, see if the European Ensemble, the Canadians picking up on it as well. Don't look at the indeterministic runs. Use the Ensemble.
I try not to get, I oftentimes just look at those and I just kind of, blow it off. And the first thing I do is I look at all the operationals to see if the other ones have it, because usually it used to be the Canadian model was one that used to spin. If you stood still too long, it would take your shoes and spin it up into a Category 5.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. When the Canadians went to 4 DVR, that kind of fixed that problem there.
Okay.
So,
because the
I think
Canadian.
one thing about the GFS with respect to tropics, like some of these spin-ups that it's had have been real. Like there've been a couple of hurricanes that the European did not see early on, but once the European saw it, then you just ignore the GFS and just go closer to what the European idea was. Then
sometimes the GFS picks up. It's been getting more hits the last couple of years since the upgrade. The false alert rate is a lot less high. It's dropped down somewhat. It has definitely picked up some early stuff the European and the Canadian model has missed. There's no doubt about it. I have to give the GFS credit on that.
But the GFS, I think certainly in the last few months has been much more. I'm not talking about the day-to-day forecasting stuff. Not really going out long range so much, but certainly, let's say inside 7 days, I think it's been much more consistent, and that the European seems to me like it's been much more inconsistent, certainly in the last few months.
Yeah, it goes through cycles. They all do. Sometimes you're just hitting the ball out of the ballpark, and then you're going 0 for 22 or 13 strikeouts. What can I tell you?
Well,
that's Castellanos in the last couple of games.
Basically, we were saying here on Joe and Joe during May, June, July, the running joke was at the 10-day mark, the GFS was turning up something tropical. And I remember, Joe, you kept saying, well, we'll just wait and see if we get a little closer, and if it's still there, when
it gets inside in 7 days, then I raise an eyebrow.
And it always disappeared. But then as we got into the mid and late summer and the GFS started doing that, it all of a sudden, with consistency, we get down to like 7 days, 5 days, and there it still was. And then eventually the European would pick up on it, and then you had an idea that, hey, this is something really to watch for. So the funny thing about the GFS is that even in the early part of the summer or late spring, it was doing this, but it was doing it somewhat unsuccessfully. But as time wore on, whatever it was doing, it started working in the middle and latter part of the summer.
I just forgot what I was going to say. Well, this happens a lot lately. I just want you to know. Okay, this does.
Nighty-night time, Joe. Actually.
Oh no! Now I remember. I'm sticking to this. I would say in the last year, we've seen a lot of really strange things happen, weather-wise. Rules that you rely on don't seem to be working very well, and some of them don't seem to be working at all. This is the first time that we've had Category 5 hurricanes in every single hurricane basin around the globe. And there's a whole bunch of things that have happened. Even the La Nina last year was bizarre in that it didn't really behave like a normal La Nina would, particularly maybe the case in the eastern part, but in the western part of the United States, it really did not behave the way it should have behaved in terms of the distribution of precip and all the rest of it. I think we're going to see I think there are going to be some surprises in the next 4 or 5 months, and during the winter months, there are going to be some things that are going to happen that we're going to shake our heads and say, how?
In case anybody didn't notice it, there's this hurricane, that tropical cyclone intensified today. Otis off the coast of Mexico.
Otis
increased 115 miles per hour in 24 hours, which is the highest intensification. Dr. Kerry Emanuel wrote a paper about it. He said that is the when he wrote a paper many years ago, he said that is the upper limit of intensification in the last 24 hours. That's not really, it's theoretically possible, but it's not possible based upon the 20th century. But if the warming temperatures of the ocean continue in the 21st century, that is possible. And sure enough, we just had one of those happen for the first time.
Well, didn't we see in the Atlantic basin? I mean, certainly nothing along the same lines as Otis, but wasn't Lee being revered for being an amazingly...
Yeah, the rapid intensification is becoming a very common thing when these systems really kick it in. There's no doubt about it.
Well, we certainly saw it with Irma, Maria, and a few others along the last number of years where the rapid intensification rate has been, phenomenal. But this one really pushed the envelope. I think it certainly caught NHC by surprise.
It certainly did, and it's either that it's because the oceans are warmer and it's causing new things that variables in the atmosphere, and the hurricanes are grabbing onto this energy, or it's aliens. I'd go with the atmosphere, but you can make a case for aliens. It's either.
Here's a broader question, Bill, and for both Bill and Dave. Bill, you take it first. Without getting people into a debate about climate change and all the rest of it, but I was just sort of thinking about this. So we've seen this sort of gradual warming. Let's say climate change is going on, okay? And I'm going to acknowledge that I've kind of come onto that side of the boat to an extent, and let's say that what we're seeing so far, we've seen warming temperatures. I mean, we've seen record highs almost on a consistent basis. You don't see that many record lows anymore. I just wonder, is there a tipping point in the atmosphere where, and I want to hope I say this clearly and understand it. Is there a tipping point in the atmosphere where the atmosphere warms up to a point where the warming reverses, and you get some sort of and by the way, and I don't mean this in like it warms up and then it just goes all nice and gets gradually cool and go back there. I'm talking about like a violent, very volatile, violent reversal where all of a sudden we're sitting down. We're seeing all this warming, you're seeing all these record highs, and then something happens where the atmosphere just sort of flips it and goes completely in the opposite direction and takes you down in the other end. Because we've seen a lot of volatility in the last number of years. We're seeing more and more volatility in terms of, the snowstorms in the Northeast. We've gotten a slew of snowstorms that have produced 20 inches or more, and you go back in the records, there were far fewer in the 1900s than there were now in the last 20 or 25 years. So I just started thinking, does the global atmosphere at some point, is there a tipping point where we could see some sort of violent reaction the other way? Or am I playing sci-fi here? I don't know.
I really don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that we've had these kind of severe winters that we've had, and you could argue maybe some of that is because of climate change, because of the way that the warming affects high latitude blocking and everything, that it helps. You have more intrusion because of that. You have more intrusions of cold air, polar vortex splits, and the like. And I mean, so there is something to that. But as far as like a violent shutoff toward cold, I mean, maybe the closest parallel you might have is what could happen to the Gulf Stream if the freshwater input from Greenland overwhelms the Gulf Stream. That all of a sudden Europe's not going to be quite as moderate a climate as it is now.
That is the thing I was going to raise as well, Bill. I describe it to people in general, the public, as sort of like the movie Day After Tomorrow. Now, that movie is, of course, complete Bravo Sierra, but there is a principle behind it which is important. In the movie, there's the buildup of fresh water from the melting glaciers and the ice caps in Greenland, which pours into the North Atlantic and ends up destroying the North Atlantic current, which alters the weather patterns around the Northern Hemisphere. You remember that London is at the same latitude as Labrador, and they don't have the same winters at all.
Right.
Okay. So there's a reason for that. That's what the Gulf Stream does, and the Gulf Stream is part of the global circulations that they talked about. There's been a lot of studies, recent news reports about that. You can just look on the global circulations.
There was something the other day about I saw something the other day. I didn't get a chance to read it. I don't know if it was just some.
It's slowing down.
It is slowing down. And I have noticed when I pull up ocean sea surface temperatures, and you could see where the Gulf Stream current is, and I can remember you see some, I'm seeing it, where it goes all the way across, and then you see it curl up just to the west of Ireland and the UK. And
right.
now it just kind of stops like halfway. You don't see that curl going all the way up. And I'm just, so there might be something to that in terms of the the Gulf Stream collapsing.
Well, yeah, and that throws a whole new variable into it, because now you have a colder, potentially colder pattern, but the atmosphere is still warm because of the pollutants being put into the atmosphere. So now you have two different competing forces, and now you're off to the races because nobody knows what the hell's going to happen at that point.
Well, Tom,
So, and again, the point here is that I want people to understand it is part of Earth's natural tendencies for that to happen. That is how the Earth cools itself when it warms up. This has been going on long before humans showed up. But, okay, it is also true that we are adding warming to the atmosphere and speeding up the process. So when people argue, well, it's all natural, well, it's all human-made, well, it's all natural, it's both. It is a natural process which we are interfering with. That doesn't mean the process didn't exist before us. It did. But it also means we're altering the process. It's both. It's not either or.
I agree. I agree with you completely on that. And the thing is when I hear, I oftentimes as a follower of the stock market, I think about the fact that you could have cyclical bear markets in an overall bull market, and you could have cyclical bull markets in an overall bear market. So in a case where we have rising temperatures, you can have periods, you can have periods where the uptrend kind of stops for a while, and then you go sideways or maybe even go down a little bit, and then eventually the uptrend reverses, and then also the other way around where you're in a cyclical downtrend, but you get these warm pop-ups in between. I mean, it's just I just go back. My own ideas are I think this is going to be. I think we're going to see some very interesting things go on this winter. In not just in the East, but I think around the pretty much around the country and maybe even around the globe. There are going to be things happening that we're going to really shake our heads at and wonder how how did this come about?
And I often ask myself, how much of this is really due to climate change, and how much is just due to we haven't been around long enough to see all the things that can happen.
Right.
To really observe them, and we're a lot better at observing what does happen in the first place.
Well, Tom Fox says a meteor strike on the Earth would be a tipping point, possibly drastically dropping the temperatures, probably wiping out a few 100 million people here and there too.
Yes.
So we don't want that. I guess my mind goes to the Twilight Zone episode where the woman was What was she in the dream? It was hot, too hot. The Earth was on fire, and everybody was trying to find their way to cooler places. And then when she wakes up for the dream, she had a fever, and she wakes up, and it was actually the reverse, that the Earth was getting colder and that they were all trying to migrate south to go someplace warm. I mean, that sort of jumped into my head there. A little bit of sci-fi action.
I don't know that episode. I can look at it.
You've never seen that episode?
No, I don't think I ever have.
Yeah, a woman is she is. You think that it's a woman is in a situation. They're all kind of in this cabin, and everything. It's just brutally hot, and the Earth's climate's gotten out of control, and the world is warming up. And when you get to the end of the episode, you wind up finding out that it's actually the reverse. She's in bed with a fever,
and the fever has broken, and she's so happy that she thinks it's just a bad dream or whatever. And that's when the doctor is conferring with her caregiver and saying, well, I'm going to try to get to Mexico or something, because the Earth, instead of approaching the sun, the Earth is now actually somehow broken out of its orbit, is now moving away from the sun and getting colder. So
New Brunswick, Canada guy, this is a good point to bring up. Both your thoughts, guys. The wildfires this year, which, smoke for who knows how long, but we had smoke in the air all over the place. Yeah. You wonder whether that has an impact of some sort.
Well, you get a lot of suspended particulate that way, and that also increases rainfall. So yeah, that's certainly a possibility. Yes, absolutely. So,
well, how long does that hang around? And some of that could rained out. It's dispersed all over the globe.
Well, it might be a short. I mean, maybe it's a short-term thing rather than a long-term thing.
Yeah. So
I think,
All right.
I mean, stuff like that happened a lot more frequently in way before we were around. We just,
yes,
it's new to
Oh
us
yeah.
because it's never happened, and it never
Well,
happened in my life.
and also the fewer people that were around before had the foresight not to build homes in places where you get a wildfire every year.
yeah. That's the other problem is that it's happened before, but you didn't have people living on the coast. You didn't have a high tech infrastructure society, which is so susceptible. Like for example, we've had lots of big solar flares which hit the Earth before, but we didn't have advanced technology. So it may have happened in 1733, for example, or 1856, but we didn't have this. So if it happens now, it's going to cause a huge different problem for us, even though it's happened before.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're not going to solve the world's problems tonight, but at least we touched upon a few things. And so, Dave, just to wrap it up, you're I would say you are bullish on the idea.
Moderately bullish.
Moderately
yes.
bullish. Okay, I could go for that. Moderately bullish on a snowier winter in the east, and are you moderately bullish on a colder winter in the east?
Yes, I am. Okay. Right. Now, I can say like if I ran a headline, I could say, and I want to get lots of clicks, coldest winter in 4 years or snowiest winter in 4 years, but that's not saying anything. So, I could get you could get clicks and reaction that way. I will say that the first time in I-95, for example, we get a 2 to 4 inch snowfall or 3 to 6 inch snowfall, it's going to be Krakatoa, okay? Because people are going to go batshit crazy with this.
It's right. Well, the first snow of the season. The first snow of the season is always a problem for both the forecaster and for everybody else, and then people get used to it. All right, let's real quick. First of all, thank you, Frank Scalera, for hitting Super Chat. Fyodor Ledkovsky, over and under. He wants us to do an over and under. All right, so I'm going to take Washington, D.C., do it easy. Washington, D.C. for the season, 15 inches, over or under?
Over where?
Washington, D.C., 15 inches, over or under?
For me, I'll take a shot at that. Over.
Over. Bill, Washington, D.C., over or under? 15.
Over.
Joe Rayo.
I'll go over as well. Who knows? This may be the winter where it gets too cold and we see all the big storms passing off to our south.
Well,
we've got Charlotte, North Carolina getting 20 inches, and meanwhile we get stuck with like flurries.
There's your bear. Sorry, I'll take over. All right, let's make this a little tougher. New York City, let's go. New York City, the normal 30 inches. New York City, over or under?
Normal, plus or minus 5 either way.
Okay.
If I had to pick one, I would go slightly above normal.
Okay, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. And that's if maybe just north, it might be a different story. Might be under.
It's always a different story north of New York.
and it also could be a different story on Long Island. Rayo?
Yeah.
I would say it's going to be like, I will say the snowfall for Central Park, somewhere between 20 and 30 inches.
So you're going to say under?
Well, if it hits 30, then it's equal, right?
All right, but you give yourself 10 inches underneath. You're saying under.
All right, okay.
Under. I'm going to say over. Let's go. Let's go.
If you ask me about Eastern Long Island, I would go over.
Okay.
I would agree on that.
All right, Boston, 45 for Boston, 45 inches.
Normal or slightly below.
Okay, Bill?
Under.
Under. Joe?
I'm going to say under 2.
All right, I'm going to take over on that.
Okay.
And let's do, all right, so the snowfall at my house here, the average snowfall is about 12 inches over the years. And by the way, down here, you talk about the 82, 83 storm to be the storm that your grandparents talk about. Down here, it's the 93.
Yes.
Where they got up to they had 2 feet plus over here. 12 inches is the normal here in Blairsville, Georgia. 2,200 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
Over or under, Bill? Dave.
Above.
Yeah.
Way above.
Over.
Way above.
Bill.
Yeah, over.
Over. Joe.
Joe, I think you're going to be complaining finally about living where you're living. I think you're going to have more than your fair share of snow this winter.
I'll say over.
Yeah.
Joe, do you have a snowblower?
No.
Oh, okay.
You know what, Joe? Down here, it melts.
Okay.
Although I'm in the woods.
Really fast.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, we didn't have a lot of snow. We had the big cold blast around Christmas time last year. It snowed 4 days in a row here. I think if you added up all 4 snowfalls, I got 2 inches. Okay, but it was brutally cold, and yet even on the day where my high was only 14. And I woke up that morning to about 1 inch of snow on the ground, and I've got a lot of trees in the areas where there is some sun. The snow disappeared, so it does melt pretty quickly. So
Yeah, it does. Yeah, the sunlight angle makes a big difference. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Dave, big hugs. Thank you so much. You're always welcome here. I know I tease you sometimes about, being the first in your class in Sharp School, but it always, from me, it always comes from a loving place, and I just want to let you know that, okay?
Or it comes from a place of gas. One of the two.
One of the two.
Okay.
And
Either one of those.
either way, it's all good. And I'm thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us here. And it always, anytime you want to come on, we'd love to have you. Bill, of course, you're such a regular that you practically get a cheese platter every time you're on from us. So we'll have to see about makeup and hair. Actually, the
hair days are long gone.
Yeah. Actually, I could feed you some cigars along the way, so we could do that.
All right, that sounds good.
So everybody, thank you all for watching tonight. Those of you on the chat board, really, really appreciate you all joining us and the great questions that you asked. And hopefully we can get a few others. I'm working on trying to get a few other people to talk about the upcoming winter. And we will see you tomorrow night, Joe and I, at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. The super chats tonight: Raymond O'Hara, Quiet John, David Schwartz,
Leon Probitsky, the chairman, of course, Scott Briller, Brandon Doherty,
twice. The chairman twice.
Raymond O'Hara. I'm going to text my uncle and ask if that's him.
Brandon Doherty and Frank Scalera. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Nighty night, everybody.
All right, guys. It was great. Great time.
Thanks for the 122 likes. Speaking of likes.
Yeah, we didn't even ask for them.
Yeah,
really.
Good night.
All right, guys. Talk later.
Good night. Great to see you.
Bye.